Hi there, welcome to the Fierce Factor podcast. I'm your host, Kaylee Lindholm. And I think it's time for us women to shift the conversation in business and step into our feminine leadership to do the most iconic work the aesthetic industry has ever seen. Each week, I'll be bringing a powerful dose of strategy, sarcasm, solutions, and sass that will rev up your creativity and ignite your brilliance as you link arms with me along our shared path of personal and professional growth in 20 minutes or less. Let's go. Hello, leader. Welcome back to the Fierce Factor podcast. It's your host, Kaylee here, and you're tuning in this week to episode number 258. This week, I'm so thrilled to jump right in and share with you my first book club pick for our brand new Fierce Factor Society. So if you're hearing about this for the first time, I announced last week our brand new program at KLC, the Fierce Factor Society. This is a launching pad for ambitious women who are driven by an insatiable hunger to grow, to lead, and to achieve their greatest potential in business and life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, practice manager, or corporate leader, I designed this space to help you step into your power and learn the tools, habits, and mindset that will help you grow into the woman who is capable of handling the success that you dream of. And I'm often asked about my morning routine, the podcasts I listen to, the coaches and consultants I work with, the things I invest in, my professional wardrobe, the books I'm reading. So I decided to incorporate these things into our weekly momentum guides that I'm creating inside of the society. So how it works is each month I'll be assigning a book, one that I've read, and I'll share with you some of the key takeaways and applications I've adopted from that book into my own life and business. I'll share some of the pivotal lessons that I'm taking away and teaching inside of our Pop Leadership Academy. And inside of the society membership site, I'll create a resource for you to work through to take these philosophies or strategies and apply them directly into your business and really for your own personal development. Many of our clients are even enrolling their managers and leaders into the society to invest in them and their growth, leveraging these resources that I'm building into monthly growth runway conversation starters, team meeting agenda builders, or simply to ignite their team members on their own personal development journey. Because listen, I get it. It's like hard enough to manage a business, your life, your fire drills, all of the day-to-day nuances of the tactical to-dos, set the vision for the company, make sure it's profitable, and think about making sure you're investing the right amount of time and focus on the things that will move the needle for you and your team professionally. And I know there's a lot of fluff out there. So let me wade through it all and bring you what is worth your time and energy to invest in. So for the first month, I'm going to bring our April book club review directly to the Fierce Factor podcast so you can get a flavor of what it will be like for our society members. And I'm sharing this early because I have a huge announcement about this particular book that I can't possibly wait to share any longer. So I'm going to start by telling you a story about how I stumbled upon this book and this author's body of work. So it kind of all started when I was at the gym one day and I was working out with my trainer. And we were talking about just business things and, whatever is on the mind. And he asked me how the planning for Alt experience was coming along. And I said, it's going great. I'm really excited this year. And then he asked me, so if you could have one dream guest come to Alt, who would it be? And I started to think about him like, oh my gosh, many of my dream guests are actually coming. And he's like, is there someone in your industry or is there somebody that you really look up to or you admire that you think would just be out there, like a big ask? And I said, I don't know. I have to think about it. Give me a week. So about a week later, I was listening to my typical podcast in the morning while I was making the boys breakfast and lunches, and this is my normal morning routine. I usually listen to about 4 podcasts or so before I start my workday. So the first one was of one of my online business mentors, Kelly Roach, and she was interviewing a man named Sahil Bloom. And he was telling the story about how he had built this booming, successful career in private equity. He was working like a dog, making a ton of money. And then he went to dinner one night and sat down for a drink with an old friend who asked him how he was doing. And so I'm sure you can relate to this. I was like, been there. He answers with the typical response, "Oh man, I'm good. So busy, just grinding, living the dream." And then his friend asks him about his parents. And at this point, Sahil was living on the opposite coast of his parents and seeing them about once a year. So he shared with his friend that, he hadn't seen him in about a year. They were in their mid 60s. And his friend paused. And then he said to him, "So if they live until 80, you're going to see them about 15 more times in your life." And that comment blindsided him with reality. And so he proceeds to tell the story in his book about going home that night to continue having drinks by himself, to buffer his emotions and make it through another quote unquote successful workday. And that day he happened to pass out on the couch and wake up still on the couch the next morning. And next morning comes, his wife comes downstairs and wakes him up, obviously concerned. And he sits up and goes on to tell the story about this epiphany that he has about it's time for things to change. I'm tired of working for financial gains at any cost. So the story goes that he and his wife move across the country to be closer to their parents where they could raise their child in closer to proximity to the grandparents. And he talks about leaving his lucrative career where he's making gobs of money to start over. And he ends up writing a blog that generates over 800,000 subscribers. I think he called it the Curiosity Chronicles. And then he ultimately develops this body of work about wealth. So make no mistake, this guy understands wealth. He spent the first 7 years of his career in high finance, serving as a vice president at a private equity fund with $3.5 billion in assets under management, in addition to serving as board member at several of the firm's portfolio companies. I mean, this guy knows money, okay? But what stopped me in my tracks that day was how different his message was, how aligned it was for me, how it left me aggressively nodding in agreement with his philosophies. And not just on this podcast I'm listening to, but then immediately after Rich Roll's podcast. And then I creeped his Instagram, and then I binged his audiobook. And then I had to get my hands on the hard copy of his New York Times bestseller, The 5 Types of Wealth. Because here's the thing, his message about wealth isn't actually about investments. It's about the definition of wealth in 5 different categories. So he talks about time wealth, referring to having control over your time and prioritizing activities that bring you energy and fulfillment. Social wealth, which focuses on the depth and breadth of your relationships and the ability to build strong, meaningful connections. Mental wealth, which emphasizes mental clarity, purpose, and the capacity for continuous growth and learning. Physical wealth centers on maintaining good health and vitality through a balanced lifestyle. And financial wealth represents financial independence and having enough resources to live comfortably and achieve your goals. Now, as the creator of the Life First business model, this message sunk into me in an unbelievably visceral way. Also, Sahil was a Stanford degreed Division I baseball player. So of course, connected instantly to the athlete mentality. He was a boy parent, same. He was so articulate. I was drawn to his relatable stories and analogies. And I started to think about the idea of this wealth scorecard, where I personally can measure my success in each of these areas, similar to the way we measure a healthy founder-led business at KLC by its wealth, health, impact, and freedom. And so I was like, this guy's my brother. Like we're siblings, right? And so I started sharing his work with my friends and engaging with his messages on social media. I was all in. So, next day comes, right? This probably honestly all happened in like a 2-day period because that's how psycho I am about binging things I get obsessed with. So I show up to see my trainer, and he happened to bring up the follow-up of our conversation. He was like, so, I had asked you about a dream guest for Alt. He followed back up asking if I had come up with one. And so I told him, no, I hadn't. And then I joked with him because, of course, this is top of mind. I said, but if I had, it would be my new fantasy friend, my brother from another mother, Sahil Bloom. And I pulled up my phone to show him who he was. And what pops up? His post about being the #2 bestseller below Mel Robbins' Let Them Theory. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, I knew I had good taste, but I'm really happy for him. Like, how big time? And so my trainer says, well, now you've got to ask him. And I was like, I thought it was a joke, right? I'm like, no, that's funny. Ha. Anyway, what's next? And he said, he's like, no, what are you talking about? You said you were going to do like the big ask. And I was like, no, why would this guy want to come to some random Josephine's event? He's traveling all over the country, speaking in front of thousands. He was on the Today Show last week, for goodness sake. And my trainer, Will, was like, just try. So I went home, thought about it, and I'm telling you right now, like, if you want to get me to take action, put me up to a challenge or tell me I can't. And that was like kind of what I was feeling. I was like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? He says no, right? So don't ask me how, but using my ninja sleuthing skills, I managed to find a direct email for someone in his camp that wasn't his agent. And I introduced myself. And anyway, I'll save this on a public podcast because I might creep someone out if they actually listen to this. But, there's obviously lots of ways to find information and connect who people know and who knows who and where they've been. And so let's just say I did a little bit of background work. I reached out, I introduced myself, and I just threw out the question if maybe he'd be available to hire to come to my in-person event in April. Now, let me just put this in context real quick. So in his book, Sahil talks about a filter for which he makes every decision in his business. He asks himself, would I do this if it would take me twice the time and I'd make half the money? So there's that, which number one, I was like, I got to adopt that as my own filter. But number two, that's what I knew I was up against, right? So we're talking about this guy that he wrote the book on being discerning about where he spends his time and energy, right? He's a #2 New York Times bestselling author. He's on the Today Show. He's one of the most sought after public speakers in the world right now. Well, sure enough, I got an email back replying, we might be interested, give us more details. And so yours truly put my little sales hat on and I responded with a video about you, my incredible clients and Fierce Factor podcast listeners. I talked about the incredible women I serve, about the work they do to empower their patients to become the best version of themselves, about the challenges of being a female founder in today's climate, and the complexities of being a medical provider and also a business builder. And I went on and on and on. And I'll cut to the cliff notes here, you guys. The bottom line, I have some very exciting news. He agreed. So Sahil Bloom will be joining us for a keynote interview at Alt. And not only that, he will be co-facilitating a session on Friday morning with me, where every one of our attendees will be building their own wealth scorecard. So this book is incredible. Truly, it's chock full of insights, stories, and strategies for managing what he calls dimmer switches in life. Sometimes you have to turn up the mental wealth switch and turn down the physical wealth switch, or turn up the financial wealth switch and turn down the social wealth switch. He provides tools and tactics like small check-ins with friends on random days, just telling them, you're thinking about them, because it's not about the big events that really matter as much as it is letting them know that you're still there even when you're not. He talks about the non-negotiables and how to create your razor or credo to live by, to set boundaries around what you will and won't be willing to do based on how that razor shapes your identity, right? Like, I am somebody who does this. I am somebody who will not do this. So many great tools in the book. And I really enjoyed this book. I am loving just really living with this body of work. And it's re-inspiring me in a way that is connecting me deeply to the purpose of what we are building, what I'm building in the world, and why we work so hard to make the impact we're making. And it reminds me of a saying I say a lot of time to our clients in the academy, that you can have it all, just not all at the same time. And I think that If we could level set our expectations properly in all the areas of our life, it's going to make us so much more impactful and excited and energized to live deeply into the season that we're in. And so, of course, you need to get the book. But when you attend Alt Experience this April, I will be bringing a book club experience like you have never had. A personal exchange of ideas and teaching with the best-selling author himself. This year's event is going to be unlike any event I've ever attended or hosted. So many surprises and so much value. It will blow your mind. And we are squeezing in a few more seats this year, but we're not expanding the room because I want to keep this as intimate and high touch as possible. Ticket prices will increase April 1st if we aren't sold out, so please don't sleep on this. And by all means, grab a copy of the 5 Types of Wealth. I will link up the book and also the registration for Alt in the podcast show notes. And finally, Fierce Factor Society members, keep an eye out for your book club accompaniments and momentum guides coming to you shortly inside of the Fierce Factor Society. Okay, leader, thank you so much for tuning in today. Super excited about all this exciting new stuff going on. I hope you jump on top of all of it. And I am excited to chat with you, same place, same time next week. Listen, leader, if you're vibing with me here, hang tight because I have a brand new resource for you. You are a successful, confident, powerful woman who just isn't into being average. No, you have a calling, and part of that calling is requiring you to level up. And I know that if you're working across the next $1 million milestone in your business, you need to be in the right circles. And perhaps that's why you found us. I'd love to invite you to join The Blueprint, a weekly resource for inspired, provocative thinkers who are taking this conversation to the next level. Get access to free business tools, podcast supplements, guideposts, and direct communication with me and my expert team. And of course, a masterfully curated circle of women making big moves and disrupting the status quo in aesthetics and wellness. You can link directly through the show notes or head to klcconsultants.com/blueprint. It's time to elevate. See you there, goddess.